So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give like 5 minutes more to wait if more people can join us. But I want to let you know that we're going to be recording this presentation. After that, we're going to share it in our social media, probably YouTube and also Facebook, okay? So for your knowledge. And buenos días a todos, bienvenidos. La presentación va a ser en inglés, pero sé que hay gente que está unida que habla español, entonces bienvenidos a ustedes, gracias por acompañarnos. Como dije antes, la presentación va a ser grabada para luego ser compartida en nuestras redes sociales, YouTube y Facebook. Voy a dar un tiempito más para ver si más gente se une a nosotros. Good morning, Richard. Thank you for joining us. So good morning, everyone. I'm going to just give you some instructions for this presentation. So as I said, this presentation is being recorded. Please keep your microphones and cameras off during the presentation. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions. If you like, you can write down your name in the chat just to keep a record of people joining us. And for my name is Luisa Moreno. I'm the internship coordinator at the Monteverde Institute. And for me, it's a pleasure to introduce you to Sam Kim. She is an intern with us here at the Institute. She's been here for 9 weeks, working with bats at the bat jungle under the supervision of Bino De Becker and Richard Laval. Sam is from New Hampshire. She wants to study marine biology, but she came here to be in touch with the cloud forest. She has been an intern, as I said, for 9 weeks here, and she's going to give you the presentation today about what she learned here about bat species, okay? So thank you, Sammy, and go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Like Louisa said, my name's Sam. I'm from New Hampshire in the United States, and I've spent the past 2 months living here in Monteverde, working with Vino and Richard at the Bat Jungle. I graduated high school last year and have spent this past year traveling. I spent 3 months traveling in the United States and then made my way to Costa Rica in April. I will also be spending this upcoming year traveling through Europe and continuing my studies before hopefully attending university. I hope to study marine sciences or potentially animal sciences, and my time in Monteverde has been an amazing introduction to biological research and ecology. Costa Rica is home to more than 100 species of bats. Monteverde is one of the most diverse areas for this species. There are 5 different types of bats in the world. Each type can be found in Monteverde. These types include Nectivores, Frugivores, Insectivores, Carnivores/omnivores, and Sanguinivores. At the bat jungle, there are 87 bats of 7 different species of fruit and Nectivore bats. Fruit bats are the most common type of bat in Monteverde due to the climate and plentiful food sources. In this presentation, I'll be looking at about 43 different species of bats. So over the past 8 weeks, I've analyzed data from a study done in 1981 by Eric Dinerstein, researching the types of bats found in Monteverde, and a comparison study done by Richard and Vino in 2020. I took all of their field notes and research and compiled them into a series of Excel sheets so that I could compare and analyze the data. All of the data was collected by setting up mist nets in various locations around Monteverde to catch bats and identify their species. Again, thank you to Richard and Vino for collecting all of this data. So the first type of bat is a nectivore, and as I mentioned, there are 5 different types of bat species. So nectivores, by definition, is an animal that derives its energy from nutrients from a diet that consists mainly of nectar from flowers. Nectivore bats are one of the most important pollinators in the world. There are several plant species that would not exist without bat pollination. Bananas are the most notable example of this. In both data from 1981 and the data from 2020, 7 species of nectivore bats were recorded. Significantly more nectivores were recorded in 2020 than in 1981. The most common nectivore species in both of the data was Hyloncitris underwoodi. Pardon my pronunciation of the species names. I'm not an expert in that. But however, there were over twice as many of this species recorded in 2020 than there were in 1981. And this is just a chart of each different species of nectivore bats, and it tells you how much of each. The dark green is 1981 and the light green is 2020. So the next type of bat is a frugivore. Frugivores were by far the most common bat species found in Monteverde. Drastically higher numbers were recorded both in diversity of species and number of bats. Frugivores are animals that live off a diet of raw fruit or fruit-like produce such as roots, nuts, and seeds. It makes sense that this is the most common type of bat in Monteverde because of the tropical climate and abundant fruit supply. Combined, there are 20 species of frugivore bats identified in the data. However, in 1981, only 12 species recorded. And then 30 years later, in 2020, 8 new species were identified. This could be because the species are new to Monteverde or because the species population in Monteverde has simply grown since the initial data collection, meaning they were present in 1981, but rare and harder to find or identify. The total number of frugivores identified in 1981 and 2020 is relatively similar. The most common species identified in 1981 was Sternera hondurensis, and close second was Derminura tolteca. Comparatively, in 2020, Derminura tolteca is the highest recorded species with a 15% increase from 1981. Sternera hondurensis is the next highest recorded species in 2020. However, the data shows that there's been a significant decrease in the population of this species since 1981. And you can see all of that here, including the new species. So C.A. castaña is a new species identified in 2020. Same with D.E. viotis, D.E. watsoni, P.H. discolor, P.L. hilleri, and S.T. burtonlini. So the next type of bat is an insectivore. Insectivores are animals that thrive solely on the consumption of insects. Insect bats eat 6,000 to 8,000 insects each night, meaning that one bat eats approximately 2 to 3 million insects each year. Overall, 12 different species were recorded. However, only 11 were recorded in 1981 and only 7 species were recorded in 2020. Again, for the one new species recorded in 2020, this could be because the species is new to Monteverde or because the species population in Monteverde has grown since the initial data collection, and is the opposite for the missing species in 2020. It could be due to a complete lack of this species in Monteverde due to extinction or migration, or just to a decrease in their population, making the species rarer and harder to identify. The most common species recorded in both 1981 and 2020 is Myotis pilosatibialis. Sorry for my pronunciation again. However, it appears the population of this species has significantly decreased since 1981. And you can see that in the chart on the screen. So the next type is carnivorous slash omnivorous bats. Carnivorous animals are species that survive off the consumption of other animals. Carnivorous and omnivorous bats in Monteverde live on a diet such as bugs, like flies and roaches, small frogs, lizards, and even fish. There were 2 species of carnivore slash omnivore bats identified. However, there were no carnivore bats identified in 2020, only in 1981. Even in 1981, the population identified as small, with only 22 bats recorded in total, and 99% of the recorded bats were of a species Trichopsirosis. I'm not 100% sure what the cause of this decrease in carnivore bats is, but it's possible that it is due to migration to lower altitudes. So the last type is my personal favorite, sanguinivores. Sanguinivore bats are also known as vampire bats. These bats usually consume about half their body weight in blood each night and take about a teaspoon of blood at a time, usually from a cow. For a cow, this is like a big mosquito bite. There were 2 species of sanguinivore bats identified in both the data from 1981 and 2020. The majority of bats identified were Desmodus rotundus, and there was a 600% increase from 2020 from 1981. This drastic increase is due to the expansion of livestock, as sanguinivores primarily feed on cattle. So to sum up the species data, like comparison, I've created 2 visuals depicting the species distribution in 1981 versus 2020. It's pretty similar for both sets of data. The most notable difference is the obvious significant increase in sanguinivores in 2020 and the absence of carnivores in 2020. It's also worth noting that there is a significant increase in Insectivores in 2020, with the population of this type of bat more than doubling. So the other thing I focused on when analyzing this data was location. There were more than 10 locations used in the data, but I closely looked at data from the Institute and data from the Monteverde Reserve. It was difficult to draw any conclusions from a comparison of 1981 and 2020 because of discrepancies in the data. There were more nights recorded in 1981 for both locations. Even so, even if there weren't these discrepancies, the data would be a bit hard to draw any conclusions because it's a bit all over the place. The chart I have here represents the data from the Institute. The green line is 1981 and the blue line is 2020. Each number on the bottom axis represents a month. As you can see, it's all over the place. It's a bit hard to tell anything, but yeah. And then this is a chart representing the reserve. The same goes, the green line represents 1981, the blue line represents 2020. Even without the discrepancies in nights, it appears that the number of bats at the Institute have dropped significantly. There were 702 bats identified in 1981 and only 338 identified in 2020. Bat populations at the reserve have remained relatively the same. So to conclude everything I've gone over in this presentation, fruit bats are the most common type of bat found in Monteverde. It makes sense with the tropical climate. The population of Insectivores has increased and more than doubled since 1981. Sanguinivores have become more common to find in Monteverde due to an increase in agriculture and the introduction of more livestock to Monteverde in 1981. There wasn't as much livestock like cattle in Monteverde as there is now, which is why the population of sanguinivores has increased by 600. And also the absence of carnivores and omnivores in Monteverde, not necessarily absence, but a significant decrease. Again, thank you to everyone for taking the time to watch my presentation. And thank you so much to Vino and Richard for like all the data and all the nights they put in to find everything for this study and this presentation. And thank you to Vino for the past 8 weeks teaching me everything about bats. Yep, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Sam.
Questions?
I don't know if anybody has questions.
Sam, this is Richard. I just want to thank you for, that was a lot of work looking at all that data, because it's like field notes and maybe in pencil scribbled in the rain, as you probably found out the hard way.
Vino's handwriting is not neat.
Yeah, well, I can't apologize for him, but mine did much better. So, I want to congratulate you just for doing all the work you've already done in helping us organize this vast amount of data, which actually goes all the way back to 1973 and a lot of stuff in between. And so that's going to be a big help to us, and hope eventually we'll get this all presented in a way that everybody can learn about this and can be published in a respected scientific journal. That's our objective. Mm-hmm. But thanks for your part in it. We do appreciate it. And thanks for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Any other questions?
Well, I have a question. Do you think that climate change has been a factor?
Yeah, definitely. Just like weather, like temperature, like carnivores, for example. So this wasn't included in our study, but I had looked at some data from like a lower altitude, and there were carnivore bats like recorded for those lower altitudes, and I think that definitely like has something to do with it, like the weather, climate change, changing temperatures based on altitude. All of that has something to do with like migration, definitely. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Well, it's for me quite interesting. And in the last 2 decades, I was here trapping bats in Monteverde. No track-ups, no frog-eating bats, but they were quite common around Curicancha, the Paja in that time, in the 80s. That's quite different. Yeah. If anyone has questions about what changed, well, my personal feelings are in the forest, you know.
Yes, tell us your personal feelings.
You want to know your personal feelings?
There's all over. I try to standardize the capture to get more or less to an identical hour and esfuerzo, like they call it in Spanish, those meters of net and hours. It was not easy in the beginning because the pandemic started quite soon, from March 2020. I lost more than 24 nights between March and June. At the reserve, I could start earlier again, normal, like compared.
Sorry for the noise.
It's quite hectic here. They're working here at the parking lot.
Yeah, sorry.
But then also, for example, November last year, there was so many rain. I think it was for Richard Laval, the record of all his data from weather conditions from rainfall. I lost so many nights there, but I compensated everything now in March, April, and May. Dinnerstein got 148 nights. I got 140 in total. Always on the same place, same altitude, same dates more or less in a month. Which in the end we will have a lot of notes about that also. But yes, much less insectivores. That was also the last decades, obvious. Most important species, Myotis parasiterialis, like half now, or less than half. Fruit bats, I was surprised to get a little bit more species, even also from lower lengths, like the famous Vampirotus major, who's normally like from 800 meters and so. nectar beds, surprised that we got more. I was not thinking about that. There's less feeders. I was not capturing around feeders or stuff, or like at the entrance of the Fogden Trail from before. He was netting so many times. He got a lot of nectar beds. I was netting all over more in the jungle and not getting like on the spot from nectar feeders. But that's quite important. I still miss to capture the vampire spectrum here in Monteverde. I didn't got a chance to let in the last 2 decades. Pity, because we know they're here. That will be a spine for me for the next year. And hey, Marion Howard, nice to see you again. Your trail was one of the nicest hours to net. Lots of diversity there. We are sitting here just above an army nest, and also, that you know.
Ants.
Well, let me point out that, this is Richard again, put on my video, that studies, long-term studies like this are rarely done anywhere in the world, and none had ever been done in the cloud forest. So once we're able to analyze all this data statistically, then we can really say definitely what kind of changes we've seen. And so this, what Sam has just told you, is just sort of a preliminary view of what we're going to be looking at. And sometimes when you look at the actual statistical analysis, things can look quite a bit different from the way it looks from the raw data. So for Vino and me, this is a work in progress, but now we've got the data. The data, you know, that's where you start. You got to have data before you can analyze it, right? And even talk about it. So wish us luck, because there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, because I know it was days and days and days of work filling in every little detail.
Yeah, lots of field notes. I had like 2 huge stacks of paper that I had to get through. But yeah. Okay.
No more questions?
I don't think so.
I got a question for you, Sam.
Okay.
Are you still wanted to be a marine biologist, or are you doubting about that?
I know I definitely want to be a biologist. I think after this, definitely I want to go into some type of like ecology, like with wildlife, animals. I definitely have reconsidered whether I'll end up going into marine sciences or animal sciences, but we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where are you going to college?
I'm not 100% sure yet. I was originally supposed to go to College of Charleston, but I decided to take another year off to travel. I'm actually going to be sailing through the Mediterranean to get a little bit of experience with marine sciences this upcoming fall. And I've been thinking about going abroad for university, especially for if I end up going for marine sciences. Like New Zealand or Australia would be like an amazing opportunity to study marine sciences, and definitely way like a better education, but they have better programs for marine science than in the States because the Great Barrier Reef. So that's something I've been considering recently, but I'm not sure yet.
Well, don't expect to get people like Vino and Richard wherever you go.
I know. Yeah, I got lucky this time.
So any other question? No? So many thanks to you, Sam, for your work, for your keep working by yourself. It's important to do that in biology. And I hope you had a very good experience working with Richard and Vino.
Yeah, I definitely did. Yeah.
And I hope you someday come back to Monteverde.
Oh, I will definitely be back.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very good.
Thank you.
And thank you everybody for being here this morning. and to Richard and Vino for all the work that you have done, especially Vino, who's been with Sam all the time. So many thanks to you. And yeah, thank you for collaborating with the Monteverde Institute too, the Bat Jungle and the Monteverde Institute. So yeah, if no more questions, that's it for this morning.
Okay,
You all.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everyone.